Hey everybody, welcome back to episode 2 of our Dare to Dream series. Now in this series, we're talking about people who played a big part in God's story because they dared to dream, not their dream, but God's dream. Now today we're going to talk about somebody that if you've been around church for very long, you've probably heard about this guy. His name is Moses. And Moses played a huge part in the story of God. He was the one who went and delivered the people out of bondage, out of slavery, because God led him to.
Right.
And so we're going to go through his story and just really talk about, break down some of the things about his life, but also about what motivated Moses to be someone who dreamed God's dream.
Yeah.
So let's jump into it and let's go over just some things that maybe are not quite so known about Moses. I think one of the first things is that Moses was born to a Levite mom and dad.
Right.
So he was part of the priesthood that God had set up through Abraham. And so he was born to this couple who followed God, loved God, and then they got into this bad situation.
Well, he was born into slavery, right?
Right.
It wasn't like the Levite line was apart from that. His parents were slaves when he was born.
Right.
So, I mean, I think that that's important for us to recognize because right now in our world, we can say, well, the church, there's so many places in the world where the church is under fire or Christians are under fire, followers of God are under fire. That's not a new thing.
No.
Right? They were
absolutely.
in slavery in the midst of major persecution to a level that none of us would even know what to do with.
Right. Well, and so what happened is that the Egyptians started to become fearful of the Hebrew people because they were multiplying in numbers. So
they had a lot of babies.
They had a lot of babies. Yeah, they had a lot of babies, and so Pharaoh and the Egyptians, they started to go, what is going to happen if these people outnumber us?
Right.
And then all of a sudden they're going to take over. So Pharaoh decides we got to do something about this. And so he puts out this edict saying, we're going to kill off all the babies
all the boys.
All the baby boys. Yeah, exactly. Right. So Moses is one of them. Like he just is born and he's, his mom and dad they just got him in the earth. And now here he is and they're going to wipe him out, or the Egyptians are wanting to take him out. So,
well, and they were taking all the baby boys and they're dumping them into the Nile River. So, I mean, just imagine that. Imagine being in this place of complete oppression. And what do you have? You have your faith and your family. And then your family, part of your family is ripped literally from your arms and thrown into a river to die.
Yeah.
I mean, it was awful. Absolutely awful.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, and we can't even fathom the amount of grief and pain that people were going through throughout, that whole moment in time. But Moses's mom decides to disobey, and she decides, hey, there's something, we're not doing this.
Right. And I mean, I think that people want to get caught up in, will you obey the laws of the land? You do obey the laws of the land. That's important. But not when those laws go against God. Yeah. Like God's rule, God's law is always number one. And yes, he's put government officials, he's put legislature, he's put all this stuff in place. And we're to honor and respect that, even when you don't agree with it, but not when it goes against God. And so his mom rebelled against Pharaoh in order to honor God.
Exactly.
Which was a big deal.
Yeah, it was. And she put her own life at risk.
And the rest of her family.
Right,
She had 2 other kids.
Sure. And I'm sure her husband, too. I mean, I'm sure if they found out, wipe the whole family out.
Right.
Like, we ain't having this. But she hid Moses for as long as she could. And then she's like, we got to do something else. And so she
Can you imagine
her-
hiding a baby? Like they're not quiet.
No.
So that's in itself is very interesting. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So she puts him in this basket, floats him down the Nile River, and he
In the very river
yeah.
that all the other babies had died in. I mean, I think that there's so many different places of significance there that other babies had been thrown in to die. He was put into a basket she didn't know what was going to happen. She just had to step out and trust God
Yeah.
in
Right.
darkness, really.
Sure,
You know?
sure.
So he's in that same river.
Absolutely. And so she floats him down this river, but she sends his sister Marion along with, like you walk along the coastline of the river or the
Watch.
shoreline of the river, watch and make sure that
Right.
everything's good. And then he lands up.
And what a horrible job. Miriam is in the weeds. Like, what is she supposed to do? He's out in the middle of this river,
Yeah.
but so that would just be an awful job. But yeah.
Yeah. Right. Well, and we could talk about this for forever, but the story is there to read in Exodus chapter 2, 3,
Right.
4.
Mhm.
That, we know that he lands up in the courts of Pharaoh.
Right.
He ends up being Pharaoh's daughter's adopted son, and he grows up in that whole culture.
Right.
And what I think is really kind of cool is that even though there was this not so perfect situation, God used this whole situation to shape and to mold Moses into the person that he needed him to be,
Right.
to do the job that God had for Moses to do. So Moses is in this political, hierarchical structure, and he's got the best education. He's being taught leadership. He's being taught social structures
Right.
and how to be, an overseer over
Right.
hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands of people.
And being taught to read and write.
Exactly. Because
Commerce and understanding how all those things worked. Absolutely. He was getting the ultimate education, and as a Hebrew.
right.
Unheard of, right?
Something that none of the other Hebrew kids would have gotten a chance to have.
Absolutely.
They would not have gotten an education or learned to read and write, any of that kind of stuff. So he lives in this system for 40 years. The first 40 years of his life, he's in
the palace.
Mhm. And under Pharaoh and learning
Right.
all of these things. And then his heart gets the best of him. And he sees one of the Hebrews, which I think what's cool about this is that somewhere, because his mom actually nursed him, raised him, he had some kind of relationship with her until he was probably 6, 7 years old.
Right.
So somehow he knows that he was a Hebrew, and he sees a Hebrew being abused by one of Pharaoh's soldiers, one of the military people, gets infuriated by it because he just can't stand that
Right.
this person is being treated like this, and I got to do something about it. So he does the wrong thing,
Right.
and he murders him.
Mhm.
And then he's found out, and then Pharaoh's like, I'm going to kill you. And so he flees
Right.
Egypt, heads out into the desert. And this is kind of another cool part of his story, though, is he's wandering around the desert, and he walks up on this situation that is happening
Mhm.
between these girl shepherds and these other shepherds. They brought their flocks up to the well to water
Right.
them, and these other shepherds come along and they try to bully them. I
Right.
don't know if they're men. I don't know, whatever.
Well, yeah,
but
they are men. I mean, yeah, I don't know either. Let me say it that way. But from what I've studied, it was these female shepherds were watering their sheep, and then these men, and some translations refer to them as men shepherds. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So they come
But were
up.
they all men? Was how many was
Yeah,
there? Was
right.
it men and women? Like it doesn't say.
The point is, though, is they go up there to water their flocks, and these other shepherds come along, and they're like, and they try to run them off.
Right.
And Moses is somewhere around the well, and he observes this. And what is it that one translation says, that he rises up?
Because what does
them?
it say? It says that he is, in verse 17, it says, some shepherds came along and drove them away, but Moses got up and came to their rescue and watered their flock. But another translation I was reading says that he rose up. So he physically inserts himself into a dangerous situation.
Exactly.
On behalf of someone else, which is that what we know is this is the second time he's done that. He's put himself in harm's way to protect someone else that's innocent or that's
or powerless.
Exactly.
But what's cool about that is that this time he handles it a little bit better than the last time.
Didn't go off killing everybody.
And because of how he cared about those girls, and he took care of them. And I love the fact that he didn't just drive the other shepherds away and go, look, you ain't going to do this to these girls. But he told them probably, hey, just sit down, let me water your flocks for you, But however it happened, he actually watered the flocks. He went
the extra mile.
Exactly.
He didn't just protect. He didn't step in and protect. He then showed love, showed compassion,
he cared
exactly
for them and cared for their flocks. And so I just think that's super cool. Because of that, though, he found a home and a wife.
Right.
And that's
So the girls that were there were all sisters, and their dad was a Midian priest.
Exactly.
And it was very common in that day and time. It's actually still common. It's more common for women to be shepherds than it is men. Right. And so the daughters of this priest were all shepherds and in a very vulnerable situation. And so that going back to their father and saying, hey, this guy came out of nowhere and he protected us. Then he went as far as to do this. The Midian priest took note and gave one of his daughters to Moses.
Well, sure. Yeah. And I'm sure that there was a period of time that all that took place.
Sure.
But
it wasn't like a Starbucks gift card, thank you card. He's like, here's my daughter.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But anyways, so I just think that's a super cool thing, that we see the compassion and the care that Moses has for hurting people and people that are powerless. And that's his heart.
Right.
Okay, so Moses ends up out in the desert, and now he's going to spend the next 40 years of his life learning to lead in a completely different way than what he's experienced before.
Right. So the first 40 years of his life, he was part of the greatest Egyptian dynasty that had ever been. And at that time, in the greatest really palace and situation in the world, to now spending the next 40 years in the lowliest of low jobs as a shepherd, which was reserved.
Something that was reserved for young girls.
Yeah, uneducated.
Yeah.
And in the heat of the desert, I mean, think about that for a second. There had to have been split-second moments. I mean, the Bible doesn't record that, but moments of going, wow, my life has taken a turn. Like, this is not great. This is not fun. And I mean, how often do we have those moments too, where we have highs and it's great and we're winning, but it's in the losses, in those moments, in the difficult situations, in the unplanned circumstances that our greatest growth comes. Right.
Well, and if you think about it from this standpoint, so Moses' first 40 years, he's learned all these things about how to lead in, society, how to lead, social structures and all that kind of stuff. But now he's in the desert, and God's call on his life is to lead people through the desert.
Right.
So
he's learning through sheep.
He's got it. Yeah. So now he can't get out there and get lost, So he's got to learn some new skills in order to complete what God's called him to do.
What are the dumbest animals out there?
Sheep. Yeah.
And so he had to, and sheep, unlike people, you can't reason with them. Fun fact, interesting information here is that a shepherd doesn't clock in and clock out. Sheep become familiar at a very early age with their shepherd's voice.
Yeah.
And then they follow their shepherd. We could both be leading separate sets of sheep and be together. And when I call my sheep, because they are familiar with my voice, they follow me. I mean, what is John 10:27? My sheep know my voice.
They hear my voice. And
they know me.
And they follow me.
Yeah. And so what what his plan for Moses to do is going to require him learning to lead in a capacity that he is not familiar with.
Right. And as a servant leader.
As a servant
not
leader.
A hierarchical,
not a positional
top-down,
leader,
right?
But as someone that, and I mean, there's actually a podcast that I'm working on that really talks a lot about that, the whole idea of what that leadership of a shepherd looks like, the heart of a shepherd,
right?
How they lead, how do they process through with the sheep in which they're leading. And Moses is learning this for the first time.
Right.
With animals that are dumb.
Right. But how much better to learn? It's hands-on training.
Right.
And God knew that Moses was going to need that kind of training in order to be able to fulfill his purpose, his call on his life.
Right.
You know? But again, we're finding a caregiver. We're seeing him as someone that looks at the helpless and says, I want to help. You know?
Well, and what is God? David refers to God as our shepherd. So there is the nurturing side of God that is compared to as a shepherd, that he leads me, he takes care of me, he restores my soul, is what David says about God.
Right.
And for Moses to now be in a situation where he's having to develop, it's in him. I believe it was in him from the beginning. And there's stuff in all of us, but the stuff that's in us, the God-given gifts and talents and calling, has to be developed. Right. You don't just wake up one day as the leader of a nation, leading him through, or leader of a people. You didn't just wake up and go, okay, I'm going to lead these people out of Egypt. He spent 40 years learning how to lead sheep before he could lead people.
Sure. Absolutely. So 40 years to learn leadership skills, 40 years to learn how to lead people.
Right.
So I think that, when we look at Moses's life, what we see is that the huge part of why he lands up in God's story is, yes, it's his obedience. When God did speak to him out of that burning bush and said, I want you to go to Egypt and I want you to set my people free. I mean, Moses reluctantly did go, but I think the heart behind it for Moses, why he was in that storyline, is because he cared about the fate of others.
Right. Well, can we talk about that for a second? Because if you'll notice that when he killed the Egyptian guard, he was paying attention. Okay. When he rescued the girls, he was paying attention.
Yeah.
When he saw the burning bush, it's because he was paying attention. And I think
that's a really good point.
Though they go in hand, and I people are like, I need a burning bush. I think we just need to pay attention. God is always around. He's always moving. He's always speaking. He's always present.
That is so good.
His compassion went hand in hand with his alertness. That he wasn't checked out. And I mean, how many times do we just go, and we zone out, we check out. Moses didn't do that.
No.
The bush, God didn't say, hey, Moses, I want to talk to you. He lit a bush on fire and the bush was not consumed. The fire did not consume it. That got his attention.
Yeah.
And then what did he do?
He said, let's go see it.
Right. What did Scripture say he did with the girls? He rose up. What did it say he did with the Egyptian?
That was abusing.
It was
Hebrew.
all three the same. He rose up.
Yeah.
He got up, he took
Mhm.
action, he was paying attention,
Yeah.
and then he was moved by compassion.
Right. I love that. I love
Yeah.
that point that you just made, that he paid attention. And I think that's a great segue right into our challenge.
Yeah.
So our challenge this week is that we want you to dare to dream a dream about how you can live a life that makes a difference to others.
Right.
So how, like you said, to pay attention. Are we willing to pay attention and dream this dream of saying, I care about you,
Right.
and I'm gonna pay attention to your life. I'm gonna be there in those moments when you need somebody, because I'm not gonna be so consumed with me
Right.
that I don't even recognize you.
Well, okay, so I think there's something to be said about waking up in the morning and positioning your mind to expect God to use you, which sounds
Yeah.
crazy when you're like, I just go to school. I am in college. I'm in grad school. I'm in high school. I'm a mom of toddlers. I just go to
Yeah.
work, and we do that. Nobody just anything like Moses with sheep.
Right.
It's
right.
the same monotonous thing every
over
day,
and over and over
all
and
day
over.
long.
Yeah.
But if you will position your mind and get a mindset that in the morning when you wake up, God, I'm awake. There's a
Mhm.
new day. There's a purpose for me.
Yeah.
Help me to see. Help me to pay attention. Help me to look
Yeah.
for opportunity and not
Sure.
to be so distracted.
That moment in the grocery store.
Yeah.
You know, that moment at work when you walk by somebody's desk and you just notice their countenance is different
Right.
than it normally is. Those are those
Right.
moments of God speaking and saying, "Hey, pay attention.
Right.
Pay attention to this person. I want to use you to make a difference in their life."
Yeah. I got really convicted by a similar situation several years ago. I had was at the church working, had to run to the grocery store.
Mhm.
I was on my phone, parked, ran in, got what I needed, came back, got in the car, and I noticed, wow, this parking lot's full. And then I had this moment, this just revelation from God, if you will. Just kind of, who did you see when you were in the grocery store?
Mm.
And
Yeah.
I honestly was like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And then it was, who checked you out? Who
Yeah.
checked out your groceries?
Right.
I have no idea. Was it a man, a woman? I don't know.
Yeah.
Who did you talk to while I was on the phone? Was that conversation one of importance? I mean, of course, it's important, but I missed.
Yeah.
I know if that particular conversation was just a dumb conversation with a friend, if I'm honest,
Mhm.
but I missed, it was a place where I really felt like the Lord convicted me of, I'm putting you in situations and in opportunities
Mhm.
to be a light to a world. Not that you're going to go in the grocery store and everybody in the produce section is going to find Jesus. But
Yeah. Right.
there was, when I say the parking lot was full, it was packed.
Mhm.
And I had just gone into a store that was full of people, and I couldn't even tell you if I made eye contact with anyone. That's how distracted and checked out I was.
Yeah.
So it was a major conviction point for me of going, I need to be present
Mhm.
wherever I'm at.
Right.
Also, safety reasons, like you shouldn't be, now they tell you not to be on your phone in the parking lot. But
Yeah.
just the idea of when you are present and you're looking for an opportunity for God to use you,
Yeah.
that's when he does.
Right.
When you're
right.
looking for an opportunity for God to speak to you, that's when he does. But if you're not looking for it, you're going to miss it.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, let's be real. One of the most powerful things that we can do for someone is to recognize them. It's like to be seen, to be known, or to know that someone saw you, someone looked and said, "Hey, you matter, you care."
Right.
Those are those moments
Right.
that we really have an opportunity to impact someone. So,
Absolutely.
So that's our challenge to you this week is be present, pay attention and dare to dream a dream that God can use you to make a huge difference in this world through your compassion, through your care for others. So anyways, that's it
great.
for this week. And we love you guys and we can't wait to see you again next week.
Yeah.
So
have a good week.
all right. Bye-bye.